This is episode 49 of Soul Care with Stevie Boy. We're in Philippians chapter 4, kind of making our way toward the end of it. Today, we're going to look at verse 19. In the verses just before this, Paul has been rehearsing to the Philippians how grateful he is for the gift that they had sent to him to help provide for his needs through a very honorable servant of Christ, who we saw a little bit about in the early part of the book, in the first chapter, whose name is Epaphroditus. This was a guy who wrestled for the Philippians in prayer, and who Paul considered his brother and his co-worker in the vineyard of God's work, and who nearly died, according to Paul, to the idea of which Paul said, had he died, it would have been sorrow upon sorrow for him. Well, now, after Paul talks about their gift, and he frames it up not simply in its financial significance. He tells them it's not just the gift. He's not trying to get in their pocketbook. He's not trying to get their financial support on this continuing basis so this ministry can survive. But what he says is he was glad to give them an opportunity to make a deposit into the bank of heaven, into their account, where Jesus said that our best bet is to lay up treasure for ourselves in heaven, where moth and rust don't corrupt and thieves don't break in and steal. And then he goes on in verse 19, after he says that their offerings and their gift had been an offering with a sweet smelling fragrance to God, an acceptable sacrifice and pleasing to God. Then he says in verse 19, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. I think it's interesting, at least, that on the heels of talking about how grateful he was for their financial gift and how that financial gift represented something more important than however many drachma, dollars, whatever currency you want to put it in, because it represented the devotion of their hearts and the generosity that grace had given them toward God and his work. And then he says, oh, and by the way, God has this way of supplying and meeting all your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. I grew up in a preacher's family, and all the time my dad preached, I know this sounds like I'm a victim. We were poor, and honestly, I didn't grow up in a shack and have outdoor outhouses. We had, we lived in a house, had a car, and all that. But the truth was, my impression as I look back, it felt this way during my childhood. In fact, I just didn't realize how to put it into words. But I think the churches where my dad served had this sense that they would keep the preacher poor and God would keep him humble. And if God needed help, they'd help keep him humble too. I can honestly say God worked through even those churches that were populated in its leadership structure by legalists and Pharisees and men and women who I don't think had much of an understanding of the love and grace of Christ. But God still used that to produce in me a desire to know and love him and serve him in my life. God's grace goes way past whatever damage some other human being can do. Well, I should be paying you about $150 an hour for that kind of therapeutic regurgitation. But what I remember is I do not remember a time when we weren't living paycheck to paycheck. I in fact remember going on vacation and my dad said he had $14 and we'd go as far as we could go on $14 and trust that God would provide the rest of the way. It's to me, I don't even find it a terrifically interesting story anymore, except to say we did have a vacation and we got back home and my dad said he still had $10 in his pocket. I don't know how that happened other than to say God provided. I look into my life now as an adult and I realize that I don't know how we're doing what we're doing. It's because God provides. I sometimes lose faith. I have to admit this. And there's a few things that seem to vex my faith. Finances are one of those things. I struggle to be okay with when our bank account gets low and to trust that God is going to provide. And some of this is because I'm not the best. Let me rephrase that. I'm awful with money. I have no excuse. I make no excuse. I'm just telling you, I'm not great with money. You don't want me to be in charge of investing anything. All my adult life, I seem, in retrospect, to have observed this law of economics and finance. I have bought high and sold low. Every house, everything I've ever... Well, God supplies my needs. Why is it so hard for me to trust Him to take care of me? I'm trying to figure that out. And if you're a little bit like me in that, you also struggle to trust that God is going to meet all your needs. This verse is for us. This is a verse for people who need to be reminded of God's faithfulness and His provision. And my God will meet all your needs. Okay, let's start there. And my God. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about our capability or lack of. This is about God. You know, the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. The one who said, if I needed anything, I wouldn't tell you because I can do it all. I have it all. I own it all. God. My God will meet all your needs. Oh, there's the rub. There is the difficult thing for Americans, and I don't think just Americans, but I can say this because I am one. We have a big time struggle discerning the difference between a need and a want. And there's a whole industry that wants to keep that line blurred. Now, I don't believe that the advertising industry is of the devil. But I do know that for an advertiser to do their job, they have to make me want to go purchase or somehow obtain their product. And usually they do that by appealing to my vanity because that's what makes me want what they've got. On occasion, it's because what they've got can make my life and my health better. And in some cases, as a matter of stewardship, it would probably be good to buy that product. But, you know, that's just a tiny, tiny little deal on it. As long as they can keep me unbalanced and somehow unclear on the difference between what I want and what I need, they've got me in a position that then they can do some big things and make some big money. In America, we have the same basic needs as a poor person in Bangalore, India. The, what are the basic human needs? Well, we need shelter and food. We need water, clean. We need clean air. We need clothing. If you want to see just this, what I think is maybe as good as there exists, a the hierarchy of what are the most important needs. Abraham Maslow did a pretty masterful job of creating his hierarchy of need. And we all need those. And that is transcultural. That makes no difference where you are when you grew up. A need is a need. Here's the difference between a need and a want. A need I cannot do without. A want I can do without. If you're a parent, this is one of the most significant things that you can teach your kids. The difference between a need and a want. This extends beyond material things, even into what we perceive our emotional and psychological and spiritual needs are. But Paul was basically talking about financial and physical needs. My God, our God, will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. It's not about your riches. It's about his riches. You know, I have two friends who I consider to be rich. I mean, they are financially wealthy people, and I'm so grateful and blessed because both of them are wonderfully generous, and they are serious about making investments into God's kingdom. When I go to dinner with either one of those people, I want to be careful because on the one hand, they can pay for any meal on that menu with pocket change, right? It's no big deal. On the other hand, I do not want to insult them by assuming that I can just order anything on the menu because after all they'll pay for it. And I wonder if we sometimes get somehow find ourselves stuck on the horns of a similar dilemma with God. I know God could provide me with certainly. I mean, his promise here is he's going to provide for my needs, but his glorious riches, they go beyond, so far beyond my needs. This is where I think, I'm going to throw a rock, but I think people who preach a prosperity gospel may need to do some rethinking. Yes, God's riches are unfathomable, they're unending, they are infinite, and our respect and honor of him should cause us to think carefully about what do we need as opposed to what do we want. Is it wrong to get what you want? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if we live on the want side all the time, we'll lose track of the need side. And when God provides for our needs, it happens. We can sometimes resent him because we didn't get what we wanted. The promise is, and my God will meet all your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. I think all of us have to figure out, what does that mean? What do I do with that? I want to just toss this one thing out. Are you living on the need side or the want side? That's the first question. The second question is, how grateful are you for the fact that your needs are being met by our God, who provides all that we need according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus? Well, that's enough. That's enough to keep your mind and heart busy for a while. Anyway, it is for me. So I'm going to close, and I hope I get to connect with you this way next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.